Good morning. So, today we are going to discuss what are genres, which is specific reference to film genres. So, as most of us here know that genres literally mean a category or a type. A typical genre is a collection of instantly recognizable stylistic features. In literature, for example, you have, I am talking very broadly now, literary genre of poetry or drama or fiction, short story, non-fiction. So, these are the broad genres, the broad categories. You might very often come across courses like course in drama or a course in let us say poetry or fiction. A subcategory would be a course in American drama or Latin American fiction. So, those are subgenre which form an integral part of a broader category. So, likewise in cinema also we have genres. Some of the most recognizable or rather instantly recognizable genres are the Western. We are basically talking in the American context. The Western, so far we have been talking very often about Western being an out and out American product, American creation or Hollywood creation. So, Western and gangster, they are the most popular genres of American drama. We also have musicals. Even in our country, musicals is a very popular genre. We have thriller, and then we have spy genre, which is a subgenre of a broader category like an action movie. We have martial arts cinema, think Hong Kong cinema, the Bruce Lee, Jet Li, Donnie Yen kind of cinema. So, that is martial arts cinema, but then we have its variants in every part of the world. I mean, Kill Bill was a good example of a martial arts cinema, but then Kill Bill is a specific category, is in a specific category of its own. We also have a very popular romantic comedy, the popularly called rom-com, and then we have science fiction. We have already done films like Blade Runner, and which was based on Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, Philip K. Dick's novel, and we have also done the Matrix trilogy. So, those are the popular genres of cinema, but then we have many more, and we are going to look at how genres are defined and categorized and analyzed, and then we will be discussing gangster as a popular genre, because gangster cinema is of course it is a Hollywood product, but then even in our own country it has become a very important genre of cinema, and then we will see how Indian cinema has interpreted and reinterpreted the genre of gangster cinema. So, genre, usually what does it evoke? It evokes the look of the characters, physical environment and significant objects. We are going to read that in detail. So, what is the look of the character, what are the objects, how are iconographies formed in genres. Genres, identities, usually what purpose do they serve? The basic purpose that they serve is to preserve a film's integrity. In one of my earlier classes, Shweta was asking, and she answered that rom-com happens to be her favorite genre. My response to that was, someone would who is a follower or an admirer of romantic comedy as a film genre, filmmakers usually make a movie to cater to that specific group of audience. but so the way the film is marketed and advertised and projected, it's aimed at a particular group or subgroup of audiences. So let's assume a movie like Clueless, Alicia Silverstone, and we had a remake of that in Hindi, Aisha. So films like Clueless or Aisha, they cater to a particular group, they cater to a niche group. That's largely female audience, girls who would be interested in maybe the lighter pursuits of life, the devil wears Prada. Okay, but then think of another genre like the Bond trilogy or James Bond movies. So these genres or these groups of films, they have their own fan following. So that's what I mean when I say that genres preserve a film's integrity and identity. Genres cater to a group of audience, and people go to a movie expecting something out of it. So followers of romantic comedies, they go to a movie like The Devil Wears Prada or Clueless, expecting something out of it. You have a movie like The Shop Around the Corner, Lubish's movie, which was remade as You Got Mail, Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. So a popular romantic comedy screenplay was by Nora Ephron. These kinds of films, they have their own following. Okay, so when you advertise a movie like this is a remake of a very popular romantic comedy of the 40s, The Shop Around the Corner, and then the audiences in the 90s, they expect an updated version of the same film. For example, Clueless is advertised as a contemporary updated version of Jane Austen's Emma, and Aisha is advertised in India as an updated version of Emma, yes, but also a remake of something like Clueless. So the audiences that go to watch those movies, they know what to expect, and genres rarely fail to live up to the expectation. Sometimes they do, but then that's another story. So genres, in other words, allow for expectations where certain things can happen and certain things can't. And when certain things happen out of the box, out of character in a particular genre, then we get instance of genre bending or genre blending, and that's also something we are going to look at today. Subgenres. So what are subgenres? I was just talking about courtroom drama as a subcategory of a drama. So what's a subgenre? Think a film like the James Bond trilogy. Now what is it? It's a subgenre of espionage thriller movie, but then again the broad genre would always remain action adventure genre, and a detective or thriller genre or an espionage, it becomes a subgenre category. Okay, so subgenre, we were talking about, subgenre is defined by specific characteristics. For example, you have a very popular category, horror cinema. Now horror has been interpreted in several countries in different ways. So Psycho is generally characterized as a horror film. Okay. We also have a subgenre of vampire films. Vampire films. And then another subgenre becomes a slasher film. So I know what you did last summer. I still know what you did last summer. So those films become a subgenre of the broad category horror cinema. Now they, as we were talking about, genres cater to a particular audience, and when you have a horror, perhaps yes, it is catering to a particular group of audience, but when you have slasher cinema or J horror, then the niche group gets more visible, more defined, more redefined. Okay, so you know that perhaps you are targeting an age group which is between 16 and 25. Okay, and those are the age groups that generally enjoy J horror and slasher films. We have post-apocalyptic cinema, which is a subgenre of science fiction. A movie like The Road, which was based on Cormac McCarthy's novel, is you can categorize it as a subgenre of science fiction. Noah, we have already discussed Noah at length in one of our earlier classes. Noah is a category of gangster cinema, and we will see how Noah becomes a category of gangster cinema and why it happened. We have already discussed Hays Code to some extent. We have sports films like our own Chak De India was a very popular sports film. Sports films in India unfortunately are not very popular, not very common, but Chak De India happened to be an exception because perhaps because of the presence of a star. Okay, so sports films are a very good example or of subgenre of drama category, because there is a lot of drama, there is a lot of action as well as dialogue and high conflict, strong characterization. These are the features we discussed in one of our earlier classes. How are movies made? So we talked about a strong narrative, plot, then we talked about characterization and conflict. Conflict creates high drama in most sport movies. Moneyball, yeah, Brad Pitt's. So that's a very popular and successful example of a sport film, and it's a drama. Any Given Sunday, Oliver Stone's. Okay, it's one of the most inspirational films of all time. That is a subcategory of drama. Then we also have courtroom dramas, another subgenre of drama. The Lincoln Lawyer, I think Matthew McConaughey, is a very popular. To Kill a Mockingbird, starring Gregory Peck, which won him his only Academy Award. To an extent, even a movie like Scent of a Woman, which ends in almost like jury-like setting, where the boy is on trial, he is about to be expelled, and then Colonel Frank Slade comes and defends him. So those kinds of, Scent of a Woman is a very good example of a typical drama. It has lots of drama, a lot of conflict. It's also a coming of age kind of film, especially for the boy. And it's a journey which these two men take and how they evolve over a period of weekend. Theoretically, a lot of work has been done. There has been a theoretician, Dudley Andrews, whose theories we are going to consider. But then a very recent book comes from someone called Rick Altman, who has written a book, Film/Genre. It's not slasher film, but it's a film genre. So what does he say? The gist of the book is that the genre film uses the same material over and again, and it's not said in a derisive way. It's a very positive statement about genre films. Same material over and again. Yeah, I don't know if you remember those two words that we did in one of our earlier classes, the concepts of fabula and sujet. Fabula is a story, sujet is the way a story is told. So fabula is a story. Once upon a time something happened. Okay, Once Upon a Time in America, Sergio Leone's film. It's a gangster film. Yeah, but and it uses the same material over and again. Have you watched the movie, Sandeep? in America, not Once Upon a Time in West. You have heard, yeah. So Once Upon a Time in America is a supreme example of a highly successful gangster movie, but it does not. It has all the tropes. It has all the characteristics. The basic raw material is present of a gangster movie, but then the sujet, the way the movie unfolds, is something very different. Then it does not follow the Godfather trajectory. Now, the Godfather is a very classic linear kind of plot. It has identifiable characters. It has conflict, the kind of conflict where we root for the so-called anti-hero in spite of his weaknesses, in spite of his fatal flaws. We still root for Don Corleone, we still root for Michael Corleone in spite of their very obvious flaws. Once Upon a Time in America takes all the tropes of a gangster movie and then turn them over their heads. What does it do? We don't have the first rule that he violates. Sergio Leone directed the movie, and the first rule he violates is of a linear plot. So the plot is anything but linear. It follows back and forth in time and very non-linear narrative. The first 15 minutes are absolutely silent and extremely violent. Then second element of plot is conflict. Yes, there is plenty of conflict and we have lots of violence, lots of bloodshed on screen, but it's not the normal good versus evil. These people kill out of greed and in the quest for power and ambition. So again, this kind of narrative departs from the essentially feel good element of the Godfather. After all, no civilians are ever killed in the Godfather. Yeah, but Once Upon a Time in America, friends kill friends, brothers betray brothers because just for power. And we are not talking about vendetta, it's for naked greed and ambition that crimes are committed here. Then we have characters. A movie like The Godfather has very relatable, very identifiable characters in spite of their essential flaws. However, in Once Upon a Time, we do not have a single sympathetic character. Okay. And we are talking about the presence of a star of the stature of Robert De Niro. Okay, but there is hardly a point when we root for the hero or when we relate to the hero because he is created in such unsympathetic tones. Okay, so what's happening now? Using the same material, yes, but it's the way the story is told. It's all in the hands of a filmmaker, what he does with his material. So yes, it's a genre, it's a recognizable genre, a gangster genre. It fulfills your expectations, but then it's the treatment that differs in Once Upon a Time in America, and it prevents it from becoming a clone of The Godfather. So that's the difference. Now, Rick Altman also suggests that genres are of repetitive nature. Yes, we know. And then repetitive nature seems to diminish the importance of each film's ending along with cause and effect sequences. Now, what does it mean that diminishes the importance of each film's ending? You know, what Altman is trying to tell us is that genre films depend on the cumulative effect of the film's often repeated situations, themes and icons. So, these are the takeaway. Genre films depend on the cumulative effect of the film's often repeated situations, themes and icons, and you know, for example, we can take example like in gangster movies, invariably we never find the hero walking away in the sunset, okay, the way we find in a western. There is also, Western is also kind of a genre, and there we know that the Western hero will never settle down. He has to ride away. He has to restore balance or equilibrium in a society which has been disrupted because of some evil character. So the hero walks in, restores and leaves. So that's because there is some other town waiting to be rescued. That's the idea. So endings are often repeated. That's what we mean when he says genre films depend on the cumulative effect of the film's repeated situations. So we know this is what is going to happen in a typical Western. This is how a typical gangster is going to end. So gangster hero, how he dies on screen. James Cagney, we are talking about the 30s Public Enemies. Then Edward Robinson in Little Caesar, Paul Muni in 1930s Scarface. So they have to die in the end. Okay, there is no hope or no life of promise and roses and wine ending for the gangster hero. So what Rick Altman is trying to suggest is that that genres prevent that element of surprise. Right? Can you think of more examples, Sandeep?
For the hero dying.
Yes. Is there any gangster movie where you have seen the hero not dying?
Recently, Ben Affleck's The Town.
Okay.
At the end of the movie, he escapes and police can't catch him. He leaves.
Mm.
And in a way, even the Goodfellas is.
In a way, yeah, but the Goodfellas is quite different in the sense that it's a life on the run. He will never find peace. It's a life worse than death. Okay, where he lives a life which is, he knows that the sum total of his life has come to nothing. Okay, he lives in a kind of a witness protection program and is always threatened, always lives under the looming shadow of threat. So it's a very inglorious kind of an end for that hero, Ray Liotta character. Okay, so he is not from where he started and the way he ended. So it almost ends with a whimper, not with a bang, the way Scarface ends. Think Al Pacino's end in Scarface, the 1983. I mean, he ends with a bang, right? Have you watched the movie? Yes. So that's the way gangsters are supposed to die. But again, in Once Upon a Time in America, the ending is extremely ambiguous. There are two gangsters there. One is played by James Woods, and of course, the leading man is Robert De Niro. We are left wondering at the end whether the De Niro character is dead or not, or whether he is just whether he is already dead and dreaming the entire movie. Okay, so it ends on a very ambiguous note. Okay, we just find a truck driving towards him, and then it passes him by, and then he looks on. So whether the idea that is that if his life has been a garbage truck, that a truck that collects garbage and takes away. Is that what Sergio Leone is suggesting? Or whether he has been moved over by that particular garbage truck and is taken away to be disposed, for his body to be disposed. So you never know how it ends. But again, it's a very inglorious ending. He doesn't die a hero's death. How does Johnny Depp die in Public Enemies? He's shot dead. Outside the movie theater? Okay. So that they have taken from John Dillinger's real life.